On this episode of Still Loading, you brought a hooker to church? Hello everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Still Loading. For this week's episode, we are bringing back the Uncharted series. It has been a little while since we've been able to talk about it, and this time I have an additional guest. As you know, Tristan from the first Uncharted episode. Tristan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thank you for coming on. And additional guest, Dylan. Dylan, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So let's jump right into this. Uncharted 2 is today's topic. We covered Uncharted 1 not last week, actually a little while ago now, hasn't it? It's been a while. So Uncharted 2, I guess the first question I have for you guys is, what were the big differences between the first game and the second game? What were the things that stuck out to you when you played it that you noticed was a huge difference between the first one and the second one? I can tell you, for me, it was the ledge detection. Like a lot of platforming. So actually, I guess for those who don't know, Uncharted 2 is a platformer shooting game developed by Naughty Dog. Came out 10 years ago. Isn't that crazy to think about? 2009.
Mm-hmm.
2009.
That's insane. I'm so freaking old.
I think it's more like a general rule I always have is like anything that's 10 years old is now retro in terms of video game stuff. Yeah.
For me, it's like, if I played it in high school, then it's still a modern game.
I know, right? And we're 10 years out of high school now, which is like, death is approaching quickly. So, I guess it's it follows the adventures of Nathan Drake, the pretty much Indiana Jones, Lara Croft hybrid. That's what a lot of people are comparing it to, at least when it first came out. So what did you guys notice was a big difference from the jump between 1 to 2?
The one thing that really jumped out at me is that they fixed the stealth combat.
Yeah?
In the first one, stealth was, I'm pretty sure I ranted about this in the first episode, but it was just so hard to like reliably know if they can see you or not. And it's like you're running, but you have to like not run too fast or you'll make noise. And then like somehow they'll still know you're there, and you can only like stealth kill one dude, and then everybody else knows you're there.
Mm-hmm.
In the second one, I could like map out everybody's patrol routes and like hide behind a wall and like come out, grab that guy, break his neck, go to the next dude. And I could like clear whole areas in stealth. Never in the first one was I able to do that.
Unless there was like a straight line of guys with their backs faced to you.
Yeah,
that was the only time.
But like even then it was kind of tricky.
Because then you have to be super quiet. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Oh, yeah. It isn't really a gameplay mechanic change, but it was really more of a directional change. The first game was pretty much confined to just the island, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Pretty much a linear story, while the second game starts off, when you're hanging from the train, you're just like, oh my God, what's happening? Like, Nathan Drake's about to fall off a cliff. And then, they change locations, they change the chronological order of how the game is presented, and it really seems like they took everything that people kind of saw as a hidden gem from one, this game that by all accounts it looked like the most generic thing possible, and when you played one, you're like, oh, I like the characters, I kind of like the game, this is pretty fun, and then they just kind of took all of those, I guess, storytelling elements and really just exploded and expanded on it. It was definitely the first thing I noticed, that and the fashion.
The fashion. In general, Nathan Drake looks a lot more handsome in this one, I would say.
When he has that furry jacket on, oh man.
I guess that's a good lead-in, though. Let's talk about the story of this game. So I agree with you, man. Like, the storytelling elements they added to this is very different. Like, in general, the story is a lot more complex, but not in a bad way. Sometimes when you add complexity to stories, you end up with stuff like, and I love anime, but anime shows where they reference a lot of things that you have no idea what they're talking about, and you have to watch the whole anime in order to understand what they referenced in the first episode, which doesn't mean that's necessarily a bad form of storytelling, but it's also a very it's hard to follow at times. So with this one, they made it much more complex without actually having to do that, but while at the same time kind of like you said, like the intro is him dangling off a train and you don't know how he got there. So they kind of do something similar to that where they throw you into something that you're not 100% familiar with. But the way they tell the story, it makes it feel linear in a sense, even though it's non-linear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just, I thought it was, a vast departure of the first games. Just, we're getting to the island, we're on the island, then we're going to go find the crashed plane, and we're going to go find, I think, what was it, like the El Dorado they wanted to find in the first game?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that was the big, the big fake. They thought it was going to be the city. Turns out it's just coffin, a statue.
Whatever,
Yeah,
that's kind of a trope in all the games, it seems, where like, oh, we're going to go find this big legiondary treasure, and then,
you're right. I guess
it's
spoilers
not what
for
you think it is.
Spoilers for all the series. The Chintamani stone is just tree sap.
I mean,
sort of
from the world tree, so it's a little more significant than how it's just tree sap. But
that's what it is, though.
But yeah, and the thing is, the third one, it's like they find I forget what they find, like a city where everyone like went insane, and the water is just like poisoned.
That's it. Yeah, it's the Aram of the Pillar of the. Oh my
You're
gosh.
right, Aram of the Pillars.
Aram of the Pillars. Is that what it is?
At least that's what the chapter is called. I think.
Atlantis of the Sands, which what I loved about that though was like I love when games, books, movies, and stuff do like historical fiction stuff like that, where
I love it,
like it's a guilty pleasure of mine. That's why I loved Indiana Jones. It's where it's taking some part of mythos and trying to explain it in the most interesting possible way. And the fact that you find in this game, spoiler alert, once again, spoiler alert for this entire episode, you find Shambhala. That is pretty much the whole purpose of this. I mean, the game, I guess to start it, the game starts off, like we said, Nathan Drake hanging from a train. You climb up out of the train. It's a really like intense sequence, especially in 2009 where games were becoming much more cinematic back then, and few were actually doing it well. It was either too hand-holdy or it was just all cutscenes.
I think that was one of Uncharted's biggest selling points, was that it was one of the first ones to really, really do it well. You could say, like, yeah, it's kind of like watching a movie, but it's not like playing, like, Indigo Prophecy or, like, Heavy Rain or something like that, where you're actually watching a movie and you have QuickTime events. It's like, all right, we're going to follow Nathan Drake, and he's a super likable guy. He's got a best friend mentor who's a super likable guy, and you're gonna have just kind of a run and gun shooting platformer, but with this really enthralling story behind it.
Well, and also all besides just those two, the other characters are just super investing.
They're
like
all
you
great.
get invested into the characters quickly. I still think that the relationship between Elena and Drake is one of the best written like love relationships in any game that I've ever played. Like,
they're perfect for each other.
They work well with each other, but they also like it doesn't feel like a fairy tale with them. It constantly feels like an actual relationship where there's arguments and you're working through things. And now, granted, it's all set in the backdrop of zombies fighting zombies towards the end of the game, and like the hopped up like natives in the Himalayas on the Chintamani stone sap, the tree sap.
Yeah, the roid guys.
The roid
yetis.
Oh, that's a great name. Oh, that should be like, if we're all at least Tristan and I. Are you playing WoW at all?
No, I can't.
We should start another guild just called the Roid Yetis. Anyway,
We'll just hang out in the cave in Hillsbrad.
And just like shoot at the people that's run by. So basically you play as Nathan Drake, like we said before. In the beginning of the game, he's trying to escape from this train that's dangling over this giant like cliffside in the middle of this. It's all snowy and it looks all cold out, and then it flashes back to like kind of trying to start how he got to where he's at, and you find out that he was approached by another character named Harry Flynn to help him steal this lamp from this museum. I forget where. Was it in Istanbul?
Istanbul, yep.
Was it in Istanbul? And the reason why they want to steal it, well, one, Harry's hired by somebody, which you find out who it is later, and he needs help to get it because it's a 2-man job for it. So Drake agrees to help when he finds out that the lamp that they're trying to steal was Marco Polo's, and it could lead to the 7 missing ships. Was it 7?
13.
13, that's it.
But you're forgetting was it Harry said, "Oh, it's a 2-man job. Like, Drake, you need to be in on this." And Nate says, "No, I think you're forgetting it's a 3-man job."
And that's when
Chloe
in.
shows up. Yeah.
And then you find out that Chloe is pretending to be Harry's girlfriend. Meanwhile, she actually still has a thing for Drake. Or they were. It's weird. Like, it's not really entirely explained. It's like it's very clear that Chloe and Drake had a romantic relationship at one point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's definitely surprised to see her there when she comes into the fold, and when she visits him at his hotel room, he's like, "What are you doing here?" Like, he clearly had no idea why she's here, but they waste no time just having sex. Like, it doesn't seem like they ever split. They were probably just like fuck buddies or something.
Yeah, it seemed like implied that, they're both like globe-trotting treasure hunters. I'm sure it's not a very common profession. So it seems like they, it was implied that they've run into each other in the past, had a fling. And at this point, I don't think Drake wasn't dating Elena or Elaine or whatever her name was, right? I think it was just like the first game happened. They were flirty, but then, they went their own ways.
I also love that when you finally do meet Elena later on in the game, they kind of hint at like what happened prior, and you don't really know, which I think is good. Like they don't need to explain everything. It kind of lets your imagination fill in the rest. Like, oh, what he did was really bad, or oh, it was a really bad breakup, or something like that.
So with Chloe, when they're talking in bed, and he's like, "Oh, what, are you with Flynn now?" And she says, "You left me. You don't get to be jealous." So clearly there was something there. They must have done a job.
This a lot better than I do.
Well, I did just watch that recap.
You did.
So, but yeah, so it seems like they were in a relationship, probably during one of their jobs, and then Nate, how he sees another job and just kind of runs off and does it. So it's like probably just left her behind, and there they are.
I could see that.
Yeah.
1 second.
Then with Elena, it's kind of. It always frustrated me a little bit because you see these, they start flirty, and then it's like by the end of the game they have a really meaningful relationship together, and then by the next game they've broken up, and you're like, what the hell? Like
a third time? Really?
Yeah, like we did all this groundwork to get us to a nice relationship, and now you guys are broken up, and we have no idea why. And like, maybe in retrospect, like maybe that's a good thing, so that you don't see like the shitty parts. It's just kind of like. You just get the more interesting parts of the relationship. And
the first time that you actually get to see kind of like the true, like you see the shitty parts, you actually obviously know about it because it all happens in between games, but it's in the fourth one. But anyway, we don't want to talk too much about the fourth one because we're going to get to that at some point. Because I loved the fourth one a lot, actually.
I actually still need to beat it, so that would be perfect.
It's so good.
Was fresh and I came back for one of these. I just started it, so
it's I love that game. So anyway, to continue on with the story of Uncharted 2, Drake, Harry, and Chloe go to the museum. They get they sneak in. That's where you're talking about the stealth mechanic. That's where they kind of show you like, hey, we can do a better stealth mechanic in that it's like the second mission pretty much.
Yeah, and they really walk you through it. So like in the first game, it's like, you can stealth, I guess. Try it maybe and fail horribly and get into a gunfight. In this one, it's like you're in a museum, and if they see you, the whole mission is like scuffed. So you need to, and so they're like, yeah, go around this corner, hug the corner, break that guy's neck, and you're like, okay, cool, I get it.
It was really well done. I remember, because I did actually. There's very few games that I go back and I replay just for fun anymore. Usually when I do that, it's like out of comfort. Like Final Fantasy VII is a comfort game for me. I'll play that a lot. This one I actually find myself going back to play it. I remember when I would go back to play it, I'd actually try to take out all the security guards. So you don't need to take all of them out in order to complete the level. But it's kind of fun to figure out how to sneak your way around and get those and take out the security guards because they're kind of out of the way. So it's an interesting, if you want to challenge yourself, it kind of makes you figure out how to stealth your way over to there. So you get the lamp, And spoil, I guess, not to no surprise, because Harry looks like a douche when you first meet him anyway. He betrays you, and you have to escape. And that's like the intro of the game, pretty much. And that's you have to escape from the museum, and
you don't.
And you don't, which I that's a thing that bothers me. Why make you do that entire running segment to get away from the guards if you're just going to get captured anyway? Like, that is a useless portion of the game. And it's not like you would need it for padding, because it takes 30 seconds tops. But it's you feel like they give you this feeling of like, I'm going to do it, I'm going to get away. And then you don't. And you're kind of like, did I do something wrong? Do I have to restart this portion of it again? Because I remember I died a couple times, and I was like, oh, that sucks. So maybe that was what was supposed to happen. But then I would go back. I'm like, okay, no, I do need to escape. So then I would escape, and then it would happen. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm just going to go back to the beginning. And no, I was captured.
Yeah, because sometimes like the fail situations aren't just you dying. It's like, oh, you weren't fast enough and they caught up to you and captured you.
Yeah.
And it's like, what difference does it make if they captured me here or when the game wants me to be captured?
Exactly. I mean, I'm sure I'll think of some other problems that I had with the game, but that's like the first one that comes to mind. It's not like it's a big problem. It's just an unnecessary section. You don't need it at all. It doesn't further the story at all, and it doesn't give you any interesting gameplay things at all. It's not like it teaches you a new mechanic. If it taught you a new mechanic, I could accept that, but it doesn't teach you a new mechanic. You're just running.
It does introduce, like, you've seen this in the first game.
The dodge roll? Do you think it's the dodge roll mechanic?
I think this is the first time in this game that you see, like, the lasers that you can roll around. So maybe that was there.
They could have probably done it a bit better of a way, but I guess that could be it, if it's just like dodging the lasers and whatnot. So you get captured, you're in jail for 3 months. A game, I could picture, we were talking about Heavy Rain before, they would have made you play through those 3 months of jail in Heavy Rain if that was the case. So then it comes out, and I love that it's 3 months later and you see Drake playing with like hand puppets, like of the like reenacting the entire events in his head. Because like, if you were in his shoes, you would totally be doing that. You would be thinking through all the different things that happened, like, how could I have avoided this if I would have just thought a little bit more quickly or something like that. And
it's a really good scene that shows that Nathan is actually pretty methodical on probably his approaches and how he evaluates himself. You know, he has all this time, and what are you going to do? You're going to think about what happened, but he's not a stupid guy. Obviously, we've seen him up to this point. He's pretty savvy and can get himself out of a lot of jams. But I think it's a pretty good character building. That one shows that he is pretty aloof, but in his aloofness, he tries his best to pretty much analyze everything he does, just so these instances won't happen again.
I never even thought about that. You're right, though. Like that, by him kind of reenacting it over and over and over again in his own goofy way, he is actually trying to plan for the future. And if he's dealing with his grief is the wrong term, because it makes it sound like he lost something, but it's just his anger and his like frustration with what happened.
I think I just realized this now, but at the beginning of the mission, he says, like, no guns, right? Where you just go in there with, like, a trank gun or something. And when he's doing the little hand puppet thing, he has a gun and he shoots Flynn. Yeah. So maybe he's like, damn it, I should have brought a gun, because then I could have killed that guy.
Yeah.
I think this is the first time anyone's ever psychoanalyzed that scene from Uncharted.
I mean, I had never thought about it until you guys were talking. I was like, shit, that's...
Yeah, that's probably a good point where he's like, all right, in this scenario, I have the gun, and, fuck you, Flynn. I'm out of here.
And the fact that he does it in the Nathan Drake way, like, he can't do anything seriously because it's too heavy for him. So, I mean, I can relate to that. I don't like to think about serious stuff. I do all the time, but I have to, like, relay it in a goofy way, because otherwise it would just drive me nuts if I actually had to talk seriously about it, like, all the time.
Wow, people deal with stress in different ways.
Exactly. So... Victor goddamn Sullivan comes back.
Hey, jackass, you're blocking my light.
I'm telling you, man, like, they have the best quips in this game series. I love their writing for Nathan Drake so much. So Sullivan bails him out, and you find out it was actually Chloe that helped bail him out as well. And understandably, Drake thinks that she betrayed him, and he's pissed.
Lock the door, Sully. We're safer in here.
Oh my god, he's savage, man. So then they get out, they find out where who Flynn's actually working for, which is this ex-Serbian criminal named Lazarevic. I was gonna say Roman. Roman was the first game. It's
Oh yeah, this is the bald guy. He's got the scar in his eye or something like that, right?
Apparently, yeah.
It's like a burn victim or something.
Something like that.
Like a botched.
Apparently, the voice actor Lazarevic is Graham McTavish, and I think he's the voice actor of Cutter from Uncharted 3 as well. And we'll get to that in Uncharted 3, why Cutter disappears halfway through. But
It's Zoran Lazarevic.
Zoran Lazarevic. I was thinking of James Bond when I heard that, because there's a villain named Max Zorin in A View to a Kill, played by Christopher Walken. A very young Christopher Walken. So you find out he's working for Lazarevic, Zoran Lazarevic. That is the most villainous name I've ever heard.
Yeah,
that
it's
is
actually pretty terrifying.
That's a great name for a villain. So you find out, and actually, the first scene that you see him with, he guts one of his own men. He takes a knife and he just jabs it right into his stomach, and he holds him there, he's holding the upper part of his back, and he's just wiggling the knife further into him. It's kind of gruesome, but you don't see the knife go in because the dude's back is facing you.
Power move, man.
It is a power move. So you go and you pretty much they then try to find Shambhala from there. I'm really simplifying it from that, because you go through the jungle, and then you find this you find where Marco Polo, some of Marco Polo's ships were landed, or where they were beached, I guess, and you find this special key which just looks like a dagger. Then you have to take that dagger, and they have to go find a specific temple in Nepal, I think.
Yeah, it is Nepal.
Is it Nepal?
Game. Yep.
And you have to find the special temple. They use the dagger in the temple to solve puzzles in there, and to figure out where Shambhala is, and then they go to Shambhala. And I believe after that whole temple scene, they then go to that's where it's the train sequence, and the train sequence is one of the most fun parts of Uncharted 2.
Right. So,
and that leads you back up to that opening cutscene.
Yeah, that's when I was 18 or whatever, and I was like, oh shit, it's all coming together. This is great.
It's such good storytelling.
Yeah, that's really has always stuck out to me, just how that all came back together, and how you've realized just how epic it was from him shooting that gas can on the train. That's just all right, this is it. It's the only option I have, and just being there in the opening, it really blew me away.
It's so good. What were you going to say, Tristan?
So to back up to Borneo,
yes.
when they're still looking,
when they're still trying to find Lazarevic after Nate gets bailed out.
Right. You get a little more character development with Chloe, where they need to use her as a mole to figure out what's going on with Lazarevic and that stuff. And they're yeah, we need 5 minutes just to get in there and look through his documents and figure out what's going on. And she's oh, 5 minutes. Yeah, no problem. I won't even have to take my top off. And he's no, we're going to plant bombs and blow some shit up to distract them. He's oh, I mean, all right, I guess that's fine.
Then she kind of plays it back on Drake later on. The scene I was just in, when they're in Nepal, trying to find the temple, they're trying to figure out the specific temple they need to go to, and Chloe's well, Drake, there's a hotel nearby. He's Chloe, not now. This is not the right time. She's it's the tallest building in the city. He's oh, well, it's a smart girl. She kind of played it right back on him a little bit there, which I thought was kind of funny.
But then as they get to Nepal, you also run back into Elena.
Yes, and her cameraman, who gets sadly killed. Jeff.
Cameraman Jeff.
He's the only person that plays in multiplayer, by the way. Cameraman Jeff.
Do you? That's the only one you play as?
Yeah, him and what's his name? Tanzim, the Nepalese Sherma.
Oh, the Sherpa.
Sherpa, Tanzim, right? He's the dude that
Tanzim.
helps him.
Yeah.
He's the dude that helps him in the Himalayas to get to Shambhala.
Let's just climb through this massive ice cave with ropes that are just lying around here.
I also love the fact that that's where you find the what did you call them again? The roid yetis.
Roid yetis.
You find the roid yetis, and Tenzin's just oh, whatever, I'll handle it.
Yeah,
I think he
guess-
fights him. It doesn't. It's
Are
not
you-
often, but he does help him fight them a little bit.
Is it one of the Roid Yetis, or do you fight wolves?
No, it's like the Roid Yeti. It's
Okay.
like it's in the cave, and it's just like, oh, this is the curse.
Over like the Nazi bodies.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, think about it. I think they might have been like ex-Nazis that got roided in the cave.
Oh,
I think
interesting.
I think I haven't played it in years, but I think that's the story is that they found some of the sap there.
Right. Yeah, because I know they had like a tin with the sap.
Yeah.
So they definitely had it. But all of the SS officers that were dead there were like shot in the head by the guy who now lives in that town with Tamsin.
Yeah.
Because he's like a
Yes.
reformed like Nazi officer.
Yes.
So
What year does this game take place?
I assume present
That-
day, so
you're-
like 2009.
Well,
That would make that guy. I
mean,
don't know if he's
the
like in
thing
his
is-
20s at the back then.
Yeah.
That's like 60. Yeah. I mean, he's in his 80s or
guess
something.
so,
That's
yeah.
conceivable.
I guess
I mean,
so,
it could also be one of those things that maybe he was a really young, like, Nazi officer. Because remember, the reason why Nazis work as such a good storytelling trope is because no one really knows what they did at all. Like, you know the big stuff, like obviously the Holocaust and whatnot, and obviously all of World War II and everything. But they were all. That's why in Indiana Jones they're a big villain, because the Nazis were hunting like mythological artifacts and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So there was, and I mean, you hear stories all the time, not necessarily the Nazis, but like, wasn't there was a story just even like maybe in the last like 10, 15 years of a Japanese soldier who was still hiding in a cave, never knew the war was over. And he was like, so much. I don't think it was like 10, 15 years ago, but it was like easily 20 years after the war had ended at least, and he was still living
yeah.
in the caves of the cave system of the one of the islands, and he thought the war was still happening, which is just crazy to think about. So I'm not saying that there was Nazis like that like 20 years some odd later, but at the end of the war there was definitely probably some Nazis still moving around trying to find these artifacts. I would guess. I mean, that's the thing. No one really knows. So that's why there's such a good storytelling trope, because it's so easy to add the supernatural element into your story, because the Nazis kind of had to deal with that a little
Yeah,
bit.
they had their fingers in a lot of pies. They just kind of wanted to consolidate power, any way they could, and they essentially had the resources of one man saying, "Yeah, do this," even though if it sounds wacky and crazy.
Just do
and
it.
Hitler was, very verifiably insane towards the end of his life. I remember reading that a lot of his like officers that were making these like great decisions for him. So yeah, if Hitler, I'm sure if he got like, oh, the Fountain of Youth might be here, just send a bunch of guys there.
Might
just
as well,
to find
why
it.
not?
Why not?
Yeah, and it's like super overdone, but even so, I love having like the Nazi bad guy, because it's like, you can have like the Russian bad guy. So you got like Lazarevich in here, and that's like pretty good. But like the Nazis were just such a clear bad guy, like it's very black and white. There's no like gray there. It's like
That's
these
why
are the
they're
bad
such good
guys.
villains.
Yeah.
Right. And
Because like in every other villain, like there's a way that there's an argument to be made that like, especially like a lot of games in the 90s and like mid to late 90s and early 2000s, like shooters specifically, and movies, action movies, it was always a Russian enemy because of the Cold War. And I mean, did Russia do some bad stuff? Yeah, but so did the US at the time. So it's like, without getting into politics or social issues, but like when you have something like that's a Russian, or after 9/11 it was a lot of Iraqi terrorists and stuff like that. It was a lot of like Middle Eastern terrorists and whatnot. But when you get into that, then you start getting into social issues, because especially now with how informed the world is. But Nazis, it's black and white. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like if they were willing to be a Nazi, they knew what they type of thing. I mean, and
Right.
plus, I also think it helps that we're so far removed from World War II. It's easier to make that more black and white than if it was right in the middle of it.
yeah, since we didn't live through it, it's just kind of a
Neither
story.
did our parents either. We're like 2-3 generations removed from the war now, which is just crazy to think.
And then like the obsession with the occult, and like we really don't know what all they were doing.
They're just it's just such good, clear villains. It
Yeah.
works so well.
I mean,
Now,
you even got-
granted, Lazarevich isn't a Nazi, but he might as well.
Right.
the way he acts and guts his own. But that's what's cool though, is that they show their villains through action. It's not just like, oh, he's a Nazi, so you automatically have that association. Like you see Lazarevich do some heinous things as the game goes on.
And actually, when you meet up with Elena, I mean, you bump into her, and he's like, "Oh, why are you here? You're just like a reporter." And she's there tracking Lazarevich because the UN or NATO thinks that he's dead, that he like got killed in a bombing.
Yeah.
Which is the little bit of backstory as to why half of his face is burned. And she's like, "Oh yeah, this guy's crazy. He does like mass executions and brutal murders and like this and that." And like, "Nate, you're not wrapped up in this, are you?" And he's like, "What? No, don't be ridiculous." And then Chloe comes jumping out, and she's like, "Nate, we gotta keep running to stay ahead of Lazarevich." And they're like, "Oh god damn it!"
They like just everything about like the storytelling is so fucking good in this game. Like I love when I was like just what we said before, how they have to use Chloe as a mole in order to stay on, so that way they can get like an insight into what Lazarevich is doing, and she constantly has to quote unquote betray them when the shit goes south, so that to keep her cover up. And it just makes it that much more interesting because you know she's going to have to like go against them at some point if like until she's ready to like blow her cover or whatnot. And it all amounts like as they go to Shambhala and you fight, you go to Shambhala and Lazarevich is there too. And what amounts to, honestly, I think the only boss fight in the entire, like only legitimate boss fight in the entire Uncharted series, because I'm pretty sure Uncharted 4 didn't have a boss fight for the final boss.
You fight Wraith with a sword.
Yeah, it's kind of quick time of
It's kind of quick timey, kind of just like the melee system. So it's, but it's not like, oh, you have to do this 3 times and it gets harder each time and there's a system or whatever.
Like, I loved the final boss in this game. Like, when you fight Lazarevich, because he gets all roided out, he becomes a roid yeti, and he's running through, and like, I just love the fact that you have like this area, and you find out that the sap from the tree of life or the world tree, is explosive when you shoot it. So what you have to do is you have to constantly run from Lazarevich, because otherwise he will beat the shit out of you. And you have to sprint, and the whole time you have to look back and kind of like plan out your movements so that way you can make him run past these sap like sacks, for lack of a better term, so you can shoot them. Yeah, so these sack like formations, sap formations on the side of trees and whatnot, so that way you can shoot them and it'll damage him. And you have to keep doing that as time goes on until you can finally kill him. And that was the only time I actually felt like there was a boss fight. Like, that's the only, and they did it well. It wasn't like it was a boss fight that they tried and I think and like failed. It was a well-designed boss fight.
Yeah, I've always had mixed feelings on it, because the game itself doesn't really lend its kind of gameplay to having a boss fight.
Normally, no, yeah.
But it was kind of one of those like out of left field, like the first time you're playing through and you're like, oh shit, like this guy's really strong and I can't just shoot him in the face. I have to, because he's all juiced up.
Yeah.
So I have to do this thing, and it was cool in if you're playing on like normal or something, but like you go back and play it on crushing and it's just like,
how much harder? Like, what's the difference on crushing? Does it just take a lot more hits? Or
no, it's still 3 hits, but you die like immediately when he shoots at you. So you have to be like way ahead of him. If you like trip and you fall like a little bit behind and he starts shooting you, you're done. And you have to start the fight over again. And it was like, that was like an hour of my life where I was just like, God damn it.
See, it's so funny because you're so reserved in person. It's so like seldom that I actually see you get upset, and I could picture it now.
Yeah, there's a reason that when I play games like that, I'll like wait until I am the only person in the house, and I'll like close the door, and that's like the only time that I like yell or like slam my fists on a desk or something. There was one time in God of War where I threw my controller.
Oh,
but I'm always real careful about it, right? Where I'm like, I'm gonna throw it at the bed because that's not gonna break anything. And of course, my laptop is sitting on the bed.
Oh, no.
So there's still a chip out of the hinge on my MacBook. And I was like, nah! Which,
this
of course,
is why
just
I don't
adds
let
to
myself get angry.
Yeah. But this is one of those games where if you're playing on that top difficulty, it's just like,
Crushing is just an insane thing. I mean, I've watched you play a little bit on Crushing, and it's just you have to be so meticulous with how you approach the combat because, like you said, just one or two shots and you're done for.
Yeah, you can't. I know I mentioned this before we started recording. You can't do what I do and just try to back kill everybody and just run into the gunfire. You need to use that cover hardcore.
And you need to be strategic about it. Like,
Yeah.
hell, I'm playing on you saw me playing before we came up to record. I'm playing on normal, and the dudes with shields are just so hard to kill in this game. And I guess, we're already talking about it, so let's use this as a transition. Let's talk about the gameplay. We kind of talked about the story. Well, not kind of, we did. We went through the whole thing. But I guess the last thing to say on the story before we jump into the gameplay was after you beat Lazarevich, kind of like the post end, like not the post credits, but like the end cinematics and stuff like that. I love how the game wraps up, how Nate and Elena have like that back and forth where I forget, it was one of your favorite lines. Do you remember it?
so it was like, how, so on a 1 to 10, how scared were you that I was going to die? It's like, I don't know, like a 4. A 4? well, what about those Yeti guys? And he's like, no, those are like an 8, I guess. And she's like, an 8? What's a 10? Clowns. Clowns? I hate clowns. It's a 10. And she's like, I saw you cry. You shed tears. You thought I was going to die. And he's like, no, you were unconscious and it was raining. She's like, it was not raining. It was sunny out. And he's like, no. You were unconscious. She goes, no, you shed tears. I put them in a bottle. I have proof. And that was like the last line of that.
Oh my God, it's such a good, once again, it shows their relationship right then and there. That's like just such a perfect ending. I love the ending to that game, or to Uncharted 2. So yeah, the gameplay. Overall, like I said, the big thing that stuck out to me as a difference when we started the beginning of the episode was the ledge grabbing detection. And it's a lot better in the second one than it is in the first one. The first one is kind of finicky, it can be a little bit like janky, but this one was a lot more like exact. It felt like.
I think it also helped that they were a lot clearer as to what is a ledge that you can grab.
Yes.
Where a lot of the stuff, it's like, these bricks are red or yellow. And it's like, this is a clear path that you can climb up. Even if it's like a secret area, it might be like a muted red behind you or something. Whereas in Uncharted 1, it's like, I literally have no idea if this is a rope that I can climb.
Here's a rope, here's a vine, here's
right.
a piece of a rock.
Right. Is this
one.
just like a vine that I can climb? Because like I've climbed vines before, but then there's other vines that you can't climb. So you just like doing that weird like jumpy grab thing.
And it's really noticeable in the first game in the like early on when you're going through, I think it's where you first find where El Dorado used to be. You have to climb down this big, almost like, it looks like a well, but it's not a well. It's this big shaft, and you have to find a vine to climb down, and you can't see the vine anywhere, and it's like really difficult to know where what it is. And like a lot of times, I mean, I died so many times in Uncharted 1 just being like, I hope this is something I can grab, and then you just fall to your death, and then you get really mad at the game designers.
Yeah, there were a lot of spots in the first game where it was kind of, there's clearly a thing that you need to do to get to the next bit of the game, but they're not like, here's the thing you need to do. And I guess I can kind of appreciate that there's like a little bit of like, you make the gamer
Don't
think.
Don't they push or like auto direct your camera in the general direction of what you need to do though?
After a little bit,
Yeah.
like it actually, I'd say Uncharted 2 makes it too easy for you. Because if I spend more than 2 minutes in a location, there's a hint button that shows up, and I'm like, dear Lord, I'm exploring still.
Yeah, like maybe just tone back the
Like
hints,
I know
please.
I know where I'm going. I have to go. There's ammo over there. There's another gun over there that I want to pick up.
I'm looking for treasures.
I'm looking for treasures. I'm enjoying the game I'm playing. I'm appreciating all the little details so you major developers put in. Like, come on, game.
They overall, like, I liked all the new weapons they added to the game. The cover system is still fine. There wasn't anything crazy they added or took away from it, I don't think. Not that I remember. I do know they made the grenade throwing a lot better because now you don't have to change to a grenade, and you also don't have to use the 6-axis controller.
Thank God there's no gyroscopes in this game.
Oh my god, we didn't even talk about that in the first episode, did we? About the gyroscope? Did we?
I'm
I don't
sure
remember
we did. I'm sure we did
That,
because
like-
that was such a pain
I
in the
don't even
ass.
know what that is. So,
So in Uncharted 1, so you have there's two different kinds of PS3 controllers. You have the DualShock, and then you have the 6-axis. I think, right? There's like the DualShock 3. I know it's like
Isn't that the same thing? The
No.
DualShock 3 and the 6-axis?
later PS3 controllers did not have the gyro built in.
oh,
Because I
I don't think.
got my PS3 in 2009.
So after
So-
they got the slim version of it, right?
Right. So every controller that I've had has had the 6-axis controls in it.
There was one. There's actually, like, if you look at original PS3 hardware, like, controllers, I think there was a difference, but maybe I'm wrong then. I'll have to look that up. But in the first Uncharted game, there was moments, and actually in like other games as well, there was moments where you actually needed to use the gyroscope in the controller in order to balance Nathan Drake to balance Drake on like a narrow log that he's walking across, or just a platform that he's walking across.
So it's like that kind of Tony Hawk, like you're grinding and you're like
Yeah.
trying to, but you have to use the controller to do it. And it was like,
I know back when the PS3 came out, they were really trying to push. This is when, remember, motion controls was still kind of like the big thing. The Wii was out. Everyone was just kind of like, oh, you can interact with the game by moving your controller around. It took everyone a while to realize, like, that's very stupid and not fun. But the PS3 was making games like Heavenly Sword, where it's like, all right, when you throw a projectile, you got to use your motion control to like figure out where it's going and stuff like that. So they really tried to shoehorn it in places.
yeah. And I mean, like, not to shit on it entirely, because, like, games like Flower, where that's
Well, okay.
but-
So if I'm going to create a game that is literally entirely built around, okay, I'm going to use this to float around, and okay, but if I'm playing an action game and then we're going to change perspectives and I have to use the motion controls, like, come on.
yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, don't try to shoehorn it into a game that already has a competent control scheme.
Another example of that working though, the Ratchet and Clank stuff on the PS3, because they only ever made you do it during the skydiving missions.
Oh, yeah, so
And I guess that's fine, because I've played other games where the skydiving comes down, you have to like kind of move the controller around. It makes it, I get you.
I think you
Yeah,
had to use it as a glider as well, and those were a pain in the ass.
So I'm sorry to kind of go back to the weird like motion controls things. There was the PlayStation 3 6-axis controller was the original PlayStation 3 controller, and it was its primary one until 2008. And then 2008, it switched over to the DualShock 3, an updated version of the controller that, like the DualShock 1 and 2, incorporates haptic technology, also known as force feedback. The 6-axis controller can also be used with a Sony's PSP Go via Bluetooth after red. I didn't know the PSP Go could get PS3 controllers to work with
me
it.
neither. That's pretty cool.
Like, I only have a regular PSP, but if I ever got a PSP Go, you could actually hook it up with Bluetooth. That's kind of awesome.
Yeah, that is cool.
Literally just looked that up and learned that now. That's actually really cool. Anyway, sorry, what were we talking about? I was looking that up.
Motion controls, boo.
Yeah.
Awkward teenage years of gaming.
Right in. I mean, every gaming generation goes through weird growing pains. Like, the old NES and Super Nintendo was all mascot platformers. That was like the big selling point. That's why, especially when you see on the Genesis, that like there's a lot of weird mascot platformers that didn't quite take. I have one for my Genesis called Awesome Possum.
Dude, Awesome Possum, he kicks Dr. Machino's butt. That's the song in the game.
Is that what it is?
Awesome Possum kicks Dr. Machino's butt. And then
You're
he
the
goes,
only
"I'm
person I know
awesome."
who's ever heard of that game besides
I'm like
me.
one of the few thousand people in the country who had Sega Channel when it came out. So I played literally every single Sega mascot.
You had you had the Sega channel?
Oh, yeah, dude. It was amazing. I love Sega Channel.
Do you know what the Sega channel is?
No idea.
So when Sega Genesis was out, there's actually an online component to it, and it was called the Sega Channel.
So it was straight up an online game service. Think of Netflix for the Sega Genesis.
Wow.
So every month, beginning of every month, you would get a new batch of games. You turn on this. It was essentially like a big. It looks kind of like the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge, but just a lot bigger, and it's connected to your phone line. And when you turned it on, There's like a Sega Genesis, and a little Sonic would run by and jump on it and turn it on, your Sega Genesis in the game. And you would get a layout, kind of, I guess it was kind of like a normal multiple choice survey type of thing, where you had different sections of like, all right, action adventure, sports, fantasy RPG, or whatever. And each month you get like around 10 games for each category that just update. And it would save your progress, not from month to month, but let's say I was playing Beyond Oasis, and I got, those were like, back in the Sega era of RPGs, so they took a long time. But if I could play that game all month, save my progress and everything, and then at the end of the month it'd be boom, all right, something else. And it was a way, especially back then, to play all these type of games that a lot of the even stores you would go to, like Blockbuster and stuff, just wouldn't have. They only had a certain number of popular titles, so you weren't going to find things like Shining Force 2 there, or Awesome Possum, because that game is pretty terrible.
It's pretty bad.
Oh yeah, dude, Awesome Possum, man.
The reason that's crazy. I've never known anyone to actually have it, because it was expensive. It was
I never
stupid
owned it,
expensive.
but I played it on Sega Channel.
But I mean Sega Channel specifically. I
Oh, yeah.
didn't know anyone who actually had Sega Channel, because it was expensive as shit.
I
From what
have
heard.
no idea. I was a kid. I have no idea.
I'm gonna have to look it up after we're done recording, because it's not really pertinent to Uncharted. But real quick, this is actually, I have a thing from Sega Channel. This is a copy of Mega Man: The Wily Wars. That was a Sega Channel exclusive that you could only get by downloading it from the Sega Channel. People have since found the ROM and ported it, and so this is like a homebrew version of it. So it's not this is not official,
But they do,
from Sega.
they make
But
it
it
like
was a
that.
homebrew version of it, and pretty much the Wily Wars was just like the first, like, I think 3 Mega Man games just for the Genesis, like updated graphics for the Genesis and whatnot. So it's an interesting little like tidbit of like gaming history. Anyway, back to Uncharted though. We got all that because we were talking about like the gimmicky stuff with the motion controls to Uncharted, then to all the different generational gimmicks, and then talked about that one Awesome Possum like mascot character to the Sega Channel. So just for all you listening, that's the recap of how we got so far off track. But back to Uncharted, we were talking about the gameplay, and we were talking about how we were happy they got rid of the 6-axis controller, or the 6-axis like motion controls, because in Uncharted 1 you needed that to throw grenades. You would like hit the grenade button, and you would see like the grenade arc show up on screen, and you actually had to move the controller in order to aim where the grenade was going to go, which was fucking awful, because you're in the middle of this firefight and you're like, okay, no, I don't want it there. Oh, no. And you just have no control over it because your hands are shaking because you're nervous from playing from this middle of this giant firefight.
Yeah, it was one of those things that, I guess I was 19 when I was playing it, and I was like really trying to like it. And if you're hiding behind something and nobody's seen you yet, and you're like, all right, I'm going to throw this grenade, it's like, oh, this is kind of cool. But then as soon as they start shooting at you, you're like, shit, wait, I need to move, but also throw this, and I have to select the grenade first, and I'm dead.
They fixed it a lot in Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 3, where like you can just tap the grenade button and he'll just like throw it like generically, and it like you kind of get it, and it's cool because it's like a fairly consistent distance each time, so you get the idea. So you can, as you play and you get more experience with it, you kind of understand the distance that he's going to throw it each time, so you can just tap it and you'll be like, all right, I should be able to hit these guys from here, and you can actually be pretty accurate with it. But then if you press and hold it, which I believe L2 was a grenade button in Uncharted 2, then you would get the arc. Then you would see the arc. But as long as you held it, then you could aim it where you want it to go, and then when you let go, he would throw it. So they definitely improved the combat in that aspect. They improved the combat in the gameplay with with different guns and the inclusion of actually some newer enemies and whatnot to make it a little bit more interesting and more difficult, depending on the enemy that you're fighting. Like we talked about before, the platforming was much improved because it was a lot easier to understand where you had to platform. But I will say I liked some, in terms of level design, I liked the fact that some of the platforms wasn't 100% like clear. In your favorite level, Urban Warfare, which is the 5th mission, I believe, there's a lot of sections where you have to climb signs that are on the sides of like phone posts or like these giant like power lines.
So speaking of Urban Warfare, on top of it being really, so in any game, I really like urban warfare, not just the name of the level, but in general. Like,
You like the concept of urban
right,
warfare.
because it's really cool when you're going through like blown up buildings and there's like different types of cover everywhere, and just that kind of thing. I really enjoy. I guess it's just like there being a grid system of there's like streets and you never know where to look, versus like if you're in the jungle, it's like, well, either they're in the trees or they're not, I guess.
But there's also trees everywhere in the jungle.
Right.
Like, so it is still hard to. I could see that like urban warfare creates a lot more of interesting, because it's the landscape can literally change due to the warfare. Like when warfare happens in the jungle, don't get me wrong, trees will fall down and like things will happen, but in general, you're still in a forest. But in you're still in a forest with trees that you can either hide behind or duck underneath. In urban warfare, like if an explosion goes off, if an explosion goes off in the jungle, explosion goes off in the jungle. Maybe a tree goes down, but overall you're still in the same. Nothing changes too much in terms of the landscape.
Right. It's just like, we'll just run like 20 feet to the left.
Exactly.
And there's more trees.
And if an explosion happens in like a city or something like that, then a building could collapse, which could either give you lots of new different types of cover, or you could get killed by falling debris.
What a great transition to the next point I wanted to make. The building that collapses.
Oh, I remember that level now.
What an amazing set piece. That was, I
Yes.
can remember, again, like 19, 20, still living at home. My dad, who's like not into games at all, was standing out in the hallway, and he was just watching for like a solid 3 minutes for that whole scene as like the helicopter's coming after you and they're shooting out the like floor below you, so the whole building is falling.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's like guys in there shooting at you, and you're like running, and it's just that the whole battlefield is encapsulated inside that building, but you can see outside the windows and like the pieces of the wall that are missing that like you're falling.
Yeah.
And like it's all on a slant, and you're like sliding to the side, and everybody's sliding, and like there's desks and debris everywhere, and it was just you jump off to your survival, and it was just like, what a cool set piece. Like, so good. I can't even.
And that's something that you would see in an action movie too. Like that's directly out of it, but you get to control the character as the building. Like I can picture literally like the camera shots that maybe an action director would choose as it's like, as the building's tilting and everyone's realizing it's tilting, and then they have to jump and fight maybe punch some people on the way out. But you get to literally be a part of it when you're playing it in that section. It's so good, man. It's
Right.
so good.
And like if you don't make the jump, or you jump too late, it's like, oh, you just fell to your death under this crumbling building. Mm-hmm. So it's, yeah.
So, you were going to say something else next, I think, though? Like, so I think we missed a story beat or something like that.
Okay, so we meet Elena. We were with both of them and Chloe. Lazarevich catches up with them. Mm-hmm. And I think Chloe turns on you again because she has to
keep up the
her
facade,
cover.
yeah.
Yeah, she's like, oh, I caught them. Drake and Elena run for it. Jeff gets shot.
Not
Lazarevich
Jeff.
kills Jeff. Very, very
He
sad death.
executes him, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
too.
because he got shot, and then you as
Yeah.
Nate are like carrying him for a while, and
Yeah,
that
that's
was
right, yeah.
that was a rift between Elena, who's like, we have to save my cameraman, and Chloe, who's like, just leave him or we're all dead. And Nate chooses Elena.
Kind of hinting at like what his ultimate choice is going to be for the in between
Right.
this awkward love triangle they have going on here.
Right. Which makes it even more, I guess, obvious that Chloe's going to be like, well, I mean, I guess I have to side with them in this situation, or they're going to kill us all.
Yeah.
But they get away, Drake and Elena. But then Elena's like, well, okay, what are we going to do next? And Drake's like, we got to go back for Chloe because, she didn't actually betray us. She just did that to save her own skin. And I owe it to her to go back and get her. Which leads to some other really cool stealth areas where you don't have a gun yet, and you're climbing on these sign posts, like down these buildings, and there's like, one of these kind of arena type things where there's, I don't know, 6 guys on, a bunch of them on the first floor, and like out in a courtyard, and like a couple guys on the second floor. And you work your way through them, stealth killing. Just how I always played it is like, if I can kill everybody with stealth, then I'm like, awesome.
And speaking of stealth gameplay, actually, just real quick to interject, they would actually give you additional rewards as like a reward for doing things stealthily. You would notice it because when you would see like a new item drop or like an ammo drop, there would be a little like blue ninja mask right next to it, meaning you only got this because you stealthily killed this person. So they rewarded you. They rewarded you for stealth kills, which I thought was a really cool gameplay mechanic.
So it's like an extra grenade, or like instead of a pistol, they'll give you the
like the Wesson,
like the Mac 10 or something. Yeah. And all of this kind of leads up to my next favorite set piece in the game, the train.
The train's so good
because Chloe is on the train, and Elena and you are in a Jeep. And you're driving along, and then you have to jump onto the train.
Yes.
To say, and then so Elena, she's off somewhere in a Jeep, and everybody else is on this train. Same train that we all know from the beginning, at some point gets blown up and is like falling off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
But this whole section where you're running along this train, which is moving and like going through like bamboo forests and like, you know, cliff faces, and there's like rivers and shit, and it's beautiful. And the whole time it's moving while you're on the train shooting guys. And like mechanically, I guess it's not that impressive. It's just kind of like a corridor that you're going down shooting guys.
But when you add the set piece and storytelling elements into it, it makes it really cool.
Right. Like any other game, if it was just like, oh, you're in like a train yard and you're just like running down this hallway basically shooting guys, it'd be like, well, that's really stupid and boring. But the fact that it's moving, going through all of these environments.
Well, you know what? In every FPS, and like I know Uncharted's not an FPS, but like in FPS games and other third-person shooters, a lot of times when you have a train level, it's all enclosed. You don't see the outside. Like for some reason, all the things in between cars are like conspicuously covered, or you're conveniently in a tunnel every time.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't ever have to really animate or render all those things. But Naughty Dog did an open concept to it. You actually see everything as you're progressing through this train. And don't get me wrong, other games have done something similar, but generally FPSs are, you know, like Ratchet and Clank. Even the second game had some train segments, but Ratchet and Clank's also much more stylized, so it's not going to be nearly as graphically intensive as something else. Plus that was on the PS2, so it was a little bit different. But like when I'm talking like once you got into the more realistic realm of like PS3, like PS3 graphics still look pretty good depending on the game. And we're going to talk about Uncharted's graphics because they are freaking gorgeous. They still hold up.
Absolutely still hold up. It's a beautiful series.
But and we're going to talk about that. But like around that time, you know, you would still see stuff like that. Like a lot of times, like you would just be in, like I think of all the Medal of Honor games I played, where if it's a train mission, you're always on it's always enclosed. You don't see the outside of the train generally. It's just enclosed. Hell, even in like some of the newer FPSs like Doom and Wolfenstein, like you don't see a lot of stuff like that. You don't see the movement outside, but Naughty Dog did it. Naughty Dog put it outside.
And it was so dynamic how it worked, where it's like, when you get to a certain train car, that's when you need to start going on the side and avoiding the flashing light posts and stuff.
There was a lot of those.
Yeah, or like, oh, there's a tunnel coming up, and that's when that happens. But like, you can sit there on the last, like on the caboose, and just like not do anything and just ride it. And I'm pretty sure it like never actually takes you to those next points.
Yeah, it's just indefinite. It just kind of which makes sense because otherwise the game would be over at that point. It would just eventually get there.
Right.
Like there's a reason why you need suspension of disbelief. Otherwise, everything like that would be like. You ever heard of the game Desert Bus by Penn and Teller?
Mm.
Oh yeah. It's just, what, don't you like drive across the country or something? Don't you drive across the country or something? It's like the Las Vegas or somewhere.
So exactly, it's Las Vegas to like Tucson, Arizona or something like that. I forget exactly where, but you drive it in real time.
Oh,
like
it's
not.
It's like a 16-hour drive or something like that.
And it just it takes you literally 16 hours, and it's not like you can just hold the acceleration button down because there's no cars in it. You're not going to run into cars, but the road still turns, and if you crash, you start back from the beginning.
Oh my god!
So you can't even just like hold it down. They made it as a joke, at like that type of thing. It wasn't meant to be a serious game.
It's like a web-based game.
Was it, or was it? I thought it was on Sega CD actually.
I thought it was a web-based game. Maybe now it's like you can play it online.
Oh yeah,
Originally,
you
I
can
don't
definitely play it
know.
online.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, it's kind of funny. They made a whole like collection of games,
Anti-games.
anti-games pretty much. Yeah, yeah. It was on the Sega CD. Penn and Teller's Smoke and Mirrors. Penn and Teller's Smoke and Mirrors is an unreleased video game starring the magician duo Penn and Teller that was planned for release initially on the Sega CD in April 1995. The game collection is a collection of several mini games and an adventure slash platform game. Yeah, blah blah. Apparently, ended up getting released somehow. The game was Smoke and Mirrors was developed by Imagineering. Was scheduled to be published by Absolute Entertainment. The game was reviewed in several publications, but Absolute went out of business before it could be released. The creators were unable to find other companies interested in the game, and it was never released. It received attention when a copy circulated on the internet in 2005. So someone dug it up on the internet, released it in 2005, and now it has a cult following ever since. They actually do charity marathons for that Desert Bus game.
Oh, I believe it. I was watching a video on the speedrunning of that game not too
How
long
do you
ago.
speedrun that game? It's the same.
Don't crash.
It's
A lot of it is just the
real time.
menuing. A lot of it's the menuing in the beginning of the game.
Really, it's just
Yeah.
how fast you get
A
through
lot
the
of
menu.
a lot of those games is just all right. The menuing, like from getting from the start to this point, that's all we gotta do. Just optimize that.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
That's really funny. But yeah, no, so they don't do it like that. They don't make it real time or realistic like
Right.
that. Otherwise, it'd be interesting. You'd either be really disappointed because you'd get there a lot faster than you were ready, or it would take way too long.
Right. So it's either like, let's just say the tunnel section.
Yeah.
Be like, so do you just kill everybody on the train and you finish the level before you get there because you're so good? Or like it comes up too soon and like the train car you're on isn't like built for that area and then you get like smacked off the top or something.
Wait, is that actually how, like...
No, that's not how it works.
Yeah, okay.
Which is
yeah.
why I'm saying like it's great because they have it dynamically working that way.
Okay, I get what you're saying. I was going to say, I'm like, that, like, how did they get away with that? But
Right,
no, that makes
right.
sense.
But there's like little foreshadowing bits where one of the cars has a tank on it. And Drake goes, a tank? What do they need a tank for? And it's just like this throwaway line that you're like, oh, there's a tank on the train, whatever.
And later on in the game, you're going through the one village where Tenzin is from. Actually, after I think you find Shambhala, right? And then you come back.
It's right before that.
I thought so. Okay.
Because you learn about Shambhala from the
Oh,
SS
from the
officers.
Nazi guy, and
Right.
then you go find the Nazi guy's like where he killed all of his men, and then when you come back, that's where the tank comes in, right?
Right. So then the end of the train section is like you shooting a helicopter out of the sky with like an anti-air gun that's like mounted on one of the other things. And Flynn finally catches up with you. And I guess he's finally like, listen, I know Chloe is betraying us, but I love her or something. And Lazarevich will kill her if he knows that she's betraying us. So I'm just kind of gonna keep her like guarded but still with me. And I'm gonna shoot Drake. And he shoots him in the gut with a Desert Eagle.
That should kill him, right?
He would be like everywhere.
His stomach would be on the floor. Dude.
I don't know anything about guns, so,
So that's the 50 cal.
it's a
pistol.
50 cal pistol.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's go look up videos of people trying to shoot desert eagles that don't know how to shoot desert eagles.
And like
Pretty hilarious.
so like I was gonna rant about this at some point. So why not now?
Let's do it. Well, I mean, we're progressing. We're telling the story and the game now through. We kind of, like we said, we recapped the story before, but there's still more elements to
Right.
dissect and go into.
So like in real life, I think the only real usage of a 50 cal pistol is like for hunters when they're like, I shot an elk and now there's a bear running at me because it wants the elk, and you're like, I need a huge caliber gun to like shoot at this bear, right?
Yeah.
So in like movies and games, so you had like Eddie Raja in the first game had a golden deagle, and then this guy Flynn has just a regular one, and I'm pretty sure the guy in the Uncharted with Chloe,
Lost Legacy.
Lost Legacy, I'm pretty sure the bad guy in there has one, but it's one of those things where like they're compensating. Because like a real like Lazarevich, he doesn't carry one. He has like a sawed-off shotgun, which I guess makes more sense.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm clearly overcompensating because I'm like trying to look like a badass, but really like I'm not.
Do you think that maybe like, I mean, they didn't show it too well, but do you think that maybe when he fired at Drake's stomach that he like grazed the side and that like, so it still would hurt a lot, but it wouldn't have done the damage if it had a direct hit to his stomach?
Yeah, I don't
He
know.
holds his side, but I feel like it's more the side center versus like just his hip or something.
Yeah, that's another thing with these games where it's like towards the end when Elena like catches a lot of a frag grenade, it's just like, oh, her white shirt is now all red. It's not like Left 4 Dead 2 where there's like chunks missing and shit.
I mean, you can't kill the characters off. They really suspend that disbelief for you a lot.
Not that I want them to be like, oh, her like intestines are hanging out. How's she gonna survive? But it's, it's that like,
Uncharted 3, Elena's in a wheelchair. It's only
but
half
it's like
her body.
if they're going to attack, if they're going to do that to their main characters, don't make it be something that they can't, like if it happened to someone that they couldn't, because they went for more realism. So if you're going to go for more realism, to be more realistic, you don't make it where you don't make something happen to your main characters that they couldn't walk away from unless you were intending to kill them in that moment. Like you said, if Drake got shot in the stomach with a 50 cal pistol, he wouldn't be there anymore. So don't still do that, but don't do a 50 cal pistol. Just do a pistol.
Yeah, have Flynn like take Chloe's like 45 or whatever she carries and shoot him with it.
Or if he's going to use that, make it that he's inept at shooting it and it misses him or something like that.
Yeah, because like the recoil on those things is insane.
Yeah.
So maybe I don't know. Maybe he did just graze him.
I mean, I think he hit. I don't remember, but I feel like knowing pretty much how movies and like because they went for a cinematic feel, knowing how like a game and movie would think, he probably got shot. Like I'm picturing the left side of the stomach or the right side of the stomach, not the dead center because that would be too perfect. So it'd always be the left or right side. I don't think they would have just grazed it, and if they did, they would have called attention to it or something. I don't know why we're dissecting this really minute detail.
It was one of those things when you have a game this good that you nitpick these little things.
Definitely. And then after the train though, the train crashes. Drake, he blows it up, right?
He does.
Yeah, so he's shot and he's like on the ground, and I guess Flynn is planning on finishing him, but there's like a propane tank that's like on the next car up, and he shoots that.
It's just it's either both. It's either I'm gonna die or I'm taking you with me type of moment for Drake, where he's like, this is the only option I have, or just take a Desert Eagle to the face.
Right.
And this is so then it cuts back to, it kind of gives you a recap, like you play a recapped version of the first level again, because that's after the train blows up. And I remember there was a lot of talking points at this time, because they talk about it a little bit in Uncharted 3 as well. Like each Uncharted game, they try to do one like particle or graphical effect really well. So the first Uncharted was water. They try to get water down really well, and it's a little dated now, but overall it still looks pretty good. You can definitely tell it's a little bit dated, but overall not the worst. Uncharted 2, they did snow. That was their big thing. They were trying to get snow, like how it kind of wisps and go like in the wind and stuff like that. And in the third Uncharted, Uncharted 3, it was sand. That was their big thing. They were trying to get like when you, when Drake steps in the sand, how does his foot leave an impression? How does it fill back up afterwards? And apparently they spent I remember reading somewhere that they would send their developers or animators like to a desert and just jump into a sand dune just to see what would happen as they would fall down the sand dune type of thing.
Yeah, there's like videos on YouTube of them just like one guy with the camera and then other people just like falling down the dunes to see like how it'll all look.
Yeah.
And like considering they did this on a PS3 is like really impressive that they have that kind of like individual like sand particle.
When I was playing it, I guess this is a good time to kind of jump into the graphics end too. Like when I was playing it to prepare for this episode, or like replaying it because we beat it a while ago. When I was playing to prepare for this episode, I was really impressed with the amount of minute details in the world. Like the world's really well realized. Like it's so, besides the graphics just looking good, it's the fact that there's so much detail in everything. Like everything just feels really highly detailed and it feels really fleshed out. And literally the only thing I could see as like that was like a true that was truly dated was the aliasing is a little bit rough. Like you can kind of see it like when like especially with Drake's hair, like it just kind of like it doesn't look quite as crisp as it would now on like the PS4. And the textures are like they're fine, but you can kind of see they're not quite as good as they are now. But the particle effects still look pretty damn good.
It's all good enough that when I came over and you were playing it, I had to ask, is this the PS3 or the PS4 version? Because like just looking at it, I'm like, I don't know.
And I was playing the PS3 version too, which is what's even crazier. The graphics are just so damn good, and I actually think they got worse on the PS3 after this. I think Uncharted 3 doesn't look as good as Uncharted 2.
I agree with you. That was one of my biggest gripes with Uncharted 3. Like I still enjoy the game, but the difference from Uncharted 1 to Uncharted 2 was just night and day. It really showed, you know, how much you can improve in such a short amount of time. As a company and getting used to knowing like a certain console and what you're developing for it.
It's so true. It's just weird that it kind of went downhill a little bit, but then they made up for it with Last of Us in terms of the graphics. I mean,
yeah, it seems almost that Uncharted 3 used a lot of assets from 2. I don't know if that was something that really happened, but when I was playing through it, it kind of seemed like that.
I could see it. I don't know. It just Uncharted 3 is interesting because I remember we were so hyped for it. Like we had a countdown going. I had a whole countdown on Facebook. I mean, I'll save that story for when we talk Uncharted 3, but like we were so hyped about Uncharted 3. And then it was still really good, but like I still think Uncharted 2, I think the two best games in the series as so far are Uncharted 2 and 4. Lost Legacy is actually really good too though. Like, I don't know if I'd put that. I'd have to replay 4 and Lost Legacy to know where I'd put it on my list definitively. But 2 is definitely in my top.
Do you think you just had too many expectations for 3?
I think so. But yes and no. So, I mean, we'll talk about it when we talk about 3. But, like, 3 had a lot of issues with their storytelling, which I'll go into detail in the episode, and I can tell you guys off mic if you're really curious about it and like immediately, but I want to save my thoughts on 3 for the episode. But it had a lot of issues in my opinion with how their storytelling, though they did improve it in other ways. Like their hand-to-hand combat was a lot of fun in Uncharted 3. And actually the multiplayer, we played a lot of Uncharted 3 multiplayer.
Yeah, I mean, we played a lot of Uncharted 2 multiplayer too.
We did.
But
we didn't even talk about that yet. They added multiplayer for the first time into the series.
Yeah.
For any Naughty Dog series, I think. I mean, technically, Jack X Racing was multiplayer, but there's not like online matchmaking for that. Like, I'm talking about like the modern interpretation of multiplayer games. That was the first time they added multiplayer into a Naughty Dog game. I guess true, like modern multiplayer.
I guess other than Call of Duty, what other PS3 games had multiplayer?
Mag.
Oh, dude, don't even get me started on Mag. I gotta rant for that.
I actually bought that game because I thought it was really cool, and then I played like 1 or 2 matches and I never touched it again. And now you can't do anything with it. It's just dead in the water.
Yeah.
They turned off all the servers. That game is literally just a shitty paperweight.
Yep.
you got Resistance. Had
Get that
multiplayer.
shit out of my face. This is
not a Resistance fan?
No way. What was that other game they had though? The guys had masks on. Killzone.
I heard Killzone had decent multiplayer. I didn't play it too much. I know it was like trying to be Call of Duty for PS3 or Halo. It was their answer to Halo.
It was like the thing that they were going for. They're like, oh, it's going to be like Halo, but like more hardcore for like the hardcore players, right? And to do that, I guess they like added weight to the weapons. So like you kind of turn like a little bit slower if you have like a shotgun or something.
That doesn't make fun. Yeah.
Right, because it was like, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, like I'm moving slower. It's like it felt as though there was input lag.
Ugh.
And like at that time I was really I had been playing PC for like several years, so I had like completely like lost all of my like joystick gamer cred. On top of that, I was just kind of like, oh Jesus, how do I even play this stupid game? I think I beat it, but like I didn't bother with the multiplayer because I would have gotten
I've
rolled.
not beaten a single Killzone game or a single
neither.
Resistance game. I need
Me
to,
neither.
especially because I'm a huge. I know Killzone didn't. Insomniac didn't make Killzone, but I need to beat Resistance because I'm a huge Insomniac fan, and those are 3 of the games I have not beaten. So I need to get around onto that.
The second 2, no, I guess all of them have campaign co-op.
Do they?
I will totally play those with you.
I'm down for that.
At least 3, because I love 3.
Or you're on your own for the first.
Right,
two.
like one's pretty good, but it gets a little long in the tooth, and then 2, they're like really Call of Duty where you can only have 2 guns. But like 3, it's basically Half-Life, except Resistance. So it's like
Yeah.
yeah.
So all right, so let's jump back to Uncharted. So we've talked about the story now. We've talked about the gameplay. Is there any thoughts about the story that we haven't talked about yet, though? We've gotten up pretty much right before the end. We talked right up until the tank scene. Is there any other spots in those? And we talked about the end credit scene. Is there any other things in the story?
Yeah, so let's just kind of like run through this to kind of tie up any holes there. So we got off the train. Drake fights through the stuff. The guy's around the train with his like bullet hole in his stomach.
That should have killed him.
He's
Right.
freezing with nothing on, bullet holes in him,
Right.
no shoes. I don't know.
I'd like to think that
Walking
that
through
the-
broken glass,
Yeah.
you know.
I'd like to think that the cold helped numb the wound and stop the bleeding. It froze
Sure,
the blood
yeah.
together.
Froze the blood.
Because that's possible. That wouldn't be frostbite, no.
So our boy Tenzin finds him, takes him back to this
Village.
village
Where you
nurses
meet
him
the
back to
Nazi.
health. Right?
You get to pet the cows.
Reformed Nazi.
Yes, the reformed Nazi.
And Elena's there. So I guess she made it there on her own in her Jeep.
I guess so. I mean, she does drive away, so she doesn't get involved at all with the train crash.
Yeah. Okay. So then our Nazi guy is like, "Hey, I can't tell you what you're looking for, but you should go into these caves where my like former SS officers' bodies are, because that'll like answer your questions." So then Tenzin is your Sherpa through the mountain.
Yeah.
And that's, it's like kind of the platformy stuff with his little grappling hook and whatever. And it's interesting because he doesn't speak English. So
It creates an interesting dynamic between Drake and him on how they communicate to each other.
yeah, because he'll be like, oh, like, I don't know how to speak Nepalese, but he'll be like,
Nepalese.
it'll be like, oh, Shen Shen.
Yeah.
And Nate's like, I jump. Okay, I'll jump, I guess. But it's really cool because, like, yeah, there's that kind of like, he's your buddy dynamic type deal, but you can't understand each other.
And I also like the fact that while they are kind of playing up the joke of the language barrier, it doesn't ever feel like he's antagonizing him for like them not being able to understand each other. It's just like he's just kind of making fun of the situation. Like, I'm with someone, we have to go to this place, we can't understand each other.
Right.
And like, what else can you do in that situation but just kind of laugh about it if you're going to get through it type of thing. So I like that mentality that he had going through it.
Yeah, like it's not Rush Hour,
Yeah.
But
We should watch that movie again. I love those movies.
But yeah, so you find like you find the SS officers, you find the sap, you get attacked by a roid yeti.
I love that name so much.
There's some sort of temple that you're solving puzzles in that I don't remember the impact that has on the story, but you make it through there and you come out at like the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And then you look down and you see Tenzin's village is on fire. And you're like, "Oh shit.
And then
His village is on fire."
And it's not even like they cut to it. You actually like travel down like zip lines and shit, right? To get there. Or you find a fast way to get down there, I remember.
Yeah, I don't remember how you get all the way down.
Neither do I. We'll have to replay it.
But then it's like another take on the urban combat, except instead of a city, you're in like this little town full of like yurts and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's still that same kind of like, oh, this building can get blown up and there's a tank that is driving through and like blowing shit up, and you have to like take cover from the tank but also kill the guys,
And you
it's
have
like,
to like make your way through the town to find rocket launchers to shoot at the tank, but
Yeah.
like it's never enough to kill it. Like you never get enough ammo to kill it in like one location, so you have to keep moving from location to location and find it, pick up a new rocket launcher, shoot it, keep on moving, find another rocket launcher, shoot it, keep on moving.
right. So that's, again, another cool like set piece there.
Yeah.
I think at one point the tank is like there's a cliff and you're like kind of hanging down on another like step below that, and the tank drives up and you see the treads like come out over you, and there's like snow
Yes,
falling,
that
and
was
you're like,
terrifying.
"Shit." But you get back to your reformed Nazi guy, and he's dying
Because I think Lazarevich shot him or something like that.
yeah, so he definitely like roughed him up or something and like got whatever information he needed. And then you are on to another set piece where I think you start driving a truck and you're like, "Oh, Elena, you should like drive the truck so I can like shoot out the side." And another truck rear ends you. And then it's one of those situations where you're like jumping from the top of one to the other and like shooting guys and like, "Oh man, my truck's about to blow up. I got to jump to the next truck." That kind of
Yeah,
thing. But
yeah,
again,
yeah.
like all on this cliff.
It just gets more and more nerve wracking because you could just jump off by accident at any moment.
Right. And that takes you all the way up to, I think it's like a monastery.
I think so, because I think the monastery is the entrance into Shambhala or something like that.
Right, right. So the monastery is my favorite area for stealth combat.
I just remember everything. So I love the game, but like a lot of this combat from the tank in the village up to there, I just found tedious. Like I actually got really frustrated with it because I'm just like, I want to see Shambhala, damn it. But at the same time, I think I don't think that's a bad design choice. I think it just got under my skin. I think by them having that, it made finally seeing Shambhala that much more worth it, because you had to fight through all of this stuff when you were so close to it just to make it to finally see Shambhala. And Shambhala looked awesome. But sorry, you were saying it's your favorite section for stealth combat?
Oh, well, I mean, just a little redeeming feature of that tank thing is that it kind of gives more depth to Tenzin, because by the end, he's holding his daughter. And you're like, damn, this guy that I was like non-verbally bonding with in this cave, his village just got blown up and we helped him save his daughter. So, I don't know, just kind of a cool little...
Once again, good storytelling.
Yeah.
Really, through gameplay too. Which is always like which games always struggle to do. They either do it through cinematics or they do it through
Uncharted 3.
Yes. Though I do think games have gotten a lot better at it. Like they don't like, especially now, like I feel like there was in like, you know, the late aughts, it was a big push to be more cinematic and more realistic. And it ended up just being more cutscene, like quick time eventy than anything. I mean, that's why you have Heavy Rain. That's why you have, I mean, don't get me wrong, I thought Heavy Rain was cool, but it's like, it's not a game that you can replay, so it's not that great of a game. You're in it for the story. Once the story's over, well,
What was that new one called? Until Dawn? Was that like a couple years ago?
Detroit
PS4
Become
one?
Human is the next
Yeah,
one. from
Detroit
those people.
is the next one by that same...
Oh yeah.
Well, they
But-
did another one with Ellen Page in
Beyond
between
Two Souls.
Beyond Two Souls. That
Yeah.
was it. That was
Okay.
also the Quantic Dream. That's the name of the
Right,
developer.
right.
Uh,
Yeah, Until Dawn is a different developer, but that's a badass game and you should absolutely play it.
I did play it.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
I definitely played that.
But like they kind of fixed a lot of the storytelling elements in, you know, like later on, because like I feel like in the mid 2000s and, you know, the mid and late aughts, they like storytelling games was like at a weird impasse. Like some things were doing it really well, like Uncharted 2 here, like BioShock before Infinite. There is some that just were doing, like, put it in perspective, 2009 is the year Demon's Souls also came out, which I was actually listening to a Retronauts podcast, and they were talking about how that game kind of like shifted the course of the gaming landscape for the better overall, because it was giving people, it showed developers that people want challenge again and not just like easy like hand-holding gameplay. And I was thinking about it. I remember the game you were playing at the same time. It came out the same year, Prince of Persia 09. And that was the one where it was just like stupid easy. Like there was no penalty for death, I remember you saying.
Yeah, I was just thinking about when you're saying like, oh, people wanted challenge and they didn't want hand-holding things. And I'm thinking the last game that I played that was really hard was like Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones, I think.
That was before. That was like
Yeah,
early.
that was the
That's like early PS2. Not early, but it's like PS2.
That was
Yeah.
the second Prince of Persia game, right?
I think so. I actually have a bunch
Oh,
of
is
them over
that-
there somewhere.
Oh no, okay. I made this mistake. Warrior Within is the second one,
Okay.
which I accidentally skipped because I thought Two Thrones would be the second one because the two in the
maybe
name.
The two, yeah.
Yeah, and then I had no idea what was happening with the story because I was like, "Who are we with? Why is this important?"
I mean, it
really
could have been
good
like
game.
Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah,
Where they
yeah.
like if you didn't play not Birth by Sleep. I'm sorry, Chain of Memories. You're like, what happened?
Oh, dude, that was just the worst thing a game company could have done. It's like, here's Kingdom Hearts 1. We're coming out with Kingdom Hearts 2, but we're secretly coming out with Kingdom Hearts 2 on the Game Boy Advance.
And
but
you won't know. Oh my
no
god.
one's going to know that Kingdom Hearts
Yeah.
2 is actually 3. And you're not going to know anything that happened.
But yeah, so Prince of Persia: Two Thrones was like you could rewind time and try to like fix the mistakes that you made, but you only had like a certain amount of rewinds that you could do.
Okay.
So it was cool, but like still challenging. Whereas then the Prince of Persia '09, where Prince was voiced by Nolan North.
Was he? Oh,
Yeah,
that's crazy.
yeah.
Nolan North did everything in the aughts. Feels like.
Which had a great opening where he's like going through a sandstorm and he's like, "Farah, where are you?" Farah's the princess's name from the originals, but that was his donkey's name because he's like a merchant who like steals shit.
Oh, okay.
So it was his donkey with like covered in gold or whatever.
That's pretty funny.
But yeah, it was like if you fall off a cliff, it just kind of like automatically rewinds you up to the next thing. So it wasn't challenging. It was just kind of like fun. So I don't hate it, but it definitely wasn't one that was like
It held
this
your
is
hand
really
a little
hard.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
But even like nowadays, like,
Well, it doesn't even need the lack of difficulty doesn't mean a game's bad. It just means like if it can make it not fun, if that makes sense. Like there's a fine line between easy and not fun. And when it gets too easy, it can be a game can very quickly just not be fun anymore. It's what the point I was trying to make.
well, I'm playing like Red Dead right now, Red Dead 2. And, I think the game is fun. There's a lot you can do. It's a little open worldy. I'm not normally a big fan of Rockstar games, but I'm really enjoying this one. But again, it's not hard. Any mission you do, if you die, you go right back to the beginning. If you're just wandering around and you die, there's no penalty for it. If you actually go into a mission, you have to fight anybody, you essentially go into the VAT system where you can just auto-target everyone's head and do it all without breaking a sweat. So there's this weird trade-off of, all right, the game is actually fun, but the action part of the game is, a cakewalk and really not fun.
And then that's what you have to like. And there's certain things that you can make a game like you have to find different trade-offs. Like the penalty, for example, a good example of a super hard game, but there's literally no penalty for dying. Super Meat Boy. Super Meat Boy is one of the toughest games ever, but the penalty for death, it's just you start at the beginning of the screen.
Well,
That's
yeah.
it. Like there's no because the challenge isn't, they're not making you suffer because they realize that the challenge is so steep that to also penalize you for dying on it is unfair versus when you have, like, you always want to try to find like a middle of the road level for, I mean, don't get me wrong, each game can be different. There's not like a perfect way to design a game. Like you're going to find, like, you have to do things that match up. So for example, like we've been playing World of Warcraft, the penalty for death is time, pretty much. Like you waste time having to go back to your body, and it fucking sucks because especially when I'm glad they fixed it a little bit because there's certain things that like that are not your fault for dying. Like if you get ganked by another player, you have no control over that. Like if there's a super high level player, even if you don't instigate them, they can just come over and kill you. And then you're spending 5 minutes, depending on where the graveyard is in the zone, you're going to spend a long ass time going back to your body. And even then you take durability. I don't think you take durability damage unless you use the spirit healer.
You don't get durability damage if you're killed by another player.
You get durability damage if you're killed by an NPC or people.
Right, yeah, if like a cat
PvE
kills you.
elements,
Yeah.
Right, then it's like 10%.
Which makes sense because then that's kind of your fault in a sense. And I have some differences with that because sometimes you'll be attacking and all of a sudden an enemy will just happen to walk into your area. You're just like, come on, man. Like I didn't pull him. So but there's a luck aspect to it, but that also forces players to be a little bit more skilled and like alert with what's happening around them. But anyway, so Uncharted, to get back to Uncharted 2, I always how did we get on that? How did we get onto the difficulty talk?
I don't
Do you remember?
I have no idea.
Well, Uncharted 2 has a good difficulty level, I'll say.
I guess it was that it's not too easy. It's like still fun without being too easy.
Yes. I will say, like, I was playing Uncharted when I was playing Uncharted 2 for this, in prep for this, I got stuck a couple times on the urban warfare mission. There was a section where I just don't know why, but for the life of me, I could not get past that. And then when I was playing it today, finally I found out why. It's the first time you encounter a dude with the machine gun, like he's on a truck bed, and Chloe has to shoot the rocket launcher to kill him, so that way you can move on to the next section. But she wasn't. Like, I would be there for like a little bit and just nothing was happening, and it was getting so obnoxious, and all I found out, I had to kill everyone but the dude on the machine gun, and as soon as I killed everyone but him, she came in and finally finished the job for it. But it was just weird. It was I died like 5 or 6 times, and I was getting really frustrated for it.
Shame you have to sit on something that nice.
Oh man, the quips on that are so good. All right. Any other thoughts on the story before we move on? Because we've been kind of like sprinkling, talking about gameplay, going back and forth the story. I know that was a little disjointed, but I actually kind of like how it has been like wrapping, like kind of like cycling into each other a lot. Because I know what the next thing I want to talk about is, but I wanted to see if there's any final thoughts on story on it before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, you get to the monastery, you fight through there, you get to Shambhala, where you meet the Rage Yetis, and I think you pretty much covered everything else at the end of the game.
With the boss fight, how I like the boss fight a
Right.
lot. What I wanted to talk about was the music as well as the voice acting, kind of just the sound overall. Because once again, Nolan North just knocks it out of the fucking park. He's so good in this game. His performance is so good. So is Sully, so is Elena, so is Chloe. Claudia Black is a voice actress for Chloe, right?
Dude, don't get me started on how amazing Claudia Black is.
What else has she done?
Okay, so she's done a lot of little things. Like she is, I forget her name, but she's like the vendor in Destiny 2
Okay.
that sells
which one?
Tess Everest.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, she is the spider demon in Diablo 3.
Okay.
She's like a pretty primary character in the later seasons of Stargate SG-1. She's one of the main characters in Farscape, although I haven't really watched that too much. But
I know you went on a big sci-fi show kick for a little bit. I remember.
Yeah,
like you were watching a lot of different like Star Trek and Stargate and stuff like that.
Yeah, but like basically anything where I hear her voice, I'm just like, yes. So down for Claudia Black.
Who else was in this? Like Nolan North, obviously. I think Emily Fisher is Elena.
What's Elena? Is it Emily Rose?
Emily Rose, that's it.
Yeah.
Is there a bathroom up here?
Not up here. I can show you real.
There's a bucket.
All right, sweet.
Yeah. We got to keep rolling though.
Yeah, you guys keep going.
Let me show you real quick.
So hey listeners, how's everybody doing? Josh is taking our guest down to the bathroom, which is very kind of him, so that he does not have to use the aforementioned bucket. And Josh is back here with us now. Yeah, that was something. But yeah, I wasn't sure if you were cutting all this out or if you wanted to have a nice little interlude of me talking about all the things that are happening outside of the room as we sit here.
I don't know. I might leave some of this in. It'll be kind of fun to. I always like. There's actually one of my favorite podcasts. Always has like you actually hear their guests leave to go to the bathroom and they come back. It's a James Bond podcast, so every time someone goes, they just call it a Walter PPK break. Which I'm like,
that's good.
I get it. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So, what were we talking about though? Oh, voice acting.
Right.
Yeah.
God, that quick, it's just wow. Yeah, you were right. The guy who did Lazarevich is also Charlie Cutter.
Okay.
In the third game.
And that's crazy because they're very different characters and very different voices on top of that.
Russian guy to a British guy.
You ever notice how a lot of like British actors and voice actors are really good at accents from like others? Like, for example, Robbie Coltrane. He is Hagrid.
Okay.
He is also he's most famous for Hagrid. I think he's also Gimli from Lord of the Rings. I think.
Gimli's played by the guy in Indiana Jones who says bad dates.
Bad dates.
You know the guy.
Yeah. Maybe not then. But no, yeah, no, it's not. That's not the same guy. Robbie Coltrane plays Hagrid though. He is also Valentin Zukovsky from the James Bond movies in GoldenEye and The World Is Not Enough. He skips the middle one, but what else has he been in? He was in a show called Cracker.
That sounds good.
And he was in Brave apparently as well. So yeah, I like him a lot, but it just kind of reminded me because like Graham McTavish is the voice actor, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know. To me, is that?
I think you mean Soap McTavish.
Yeah, right. Isn't he the voice of Soap as well?
I do not know.
Hold
That'd
on,
be
let's see.
interesting, though, wouldn't it?
Right. Graham McTavish. Oh, he's in. Oh, my wife's been watching this show called Outlander, and he's been in that too.
Yo, my mom just got into that show.
It's a cool show. I won't lie. He's also in the Castlevania animated show. Cool to know.
I still have to finish that.
He's in the Hobbit movies as well, which is
Boo.
yeah. I don't know what else, but yeah, he's been in a lot. But that's kind of cool that they reused him for Cutter. I had no idea. You don't like the Hobbit movies, I take it?
Dude, I love Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And those movies, the extended editions, it's all so good. And then The Hobbit, they're like, hey, we're going to take this one book that's like pretty good, and we're going to break it up into 3 movies and inject all this other random bullshit that wasn't in the book so that we can stretch it out to 3 movies.
Did they actually inject a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't in the books?
Oh my God. So much random bullshit.
That's so dumb considering they had cut so much out of the original trilogy.
Right. Like, yeah, so you have the first, or I guess The Hobbit was first, but the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
That they did a pretty good job. There's like a handful of things that they cut from the first book. But like, even so, assuming you're watching the extended editions, it's like 7 hours.
Yeah.
Of that stuff for those 3 books. And then you have also 7 hours for one book that was more, I feel like The Hobbit was more aimed for like a younger audience.
Well, it definitely was. He wrote that Tolkien wrote that for kids, and then he wanted to write a more adult version, which was Lord of the Rings.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know, man. Like there's some good stuff in there, but just oh, and then they had a lot of stuff was like digitally done rather than like practical, like they did in the first or in the trilogy.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, everything didn't look as good, and everything was like weird because they're like, oh, we're in this lake town for like one entire movie, and it's like, okay, I mean they were there, but like not for that long. And
well, we got way off track. We could have.
I think that was pertinent. People need to know.
We could have a whole episode just on your hatred of those movies. It'd be good.
I'd have to watch them again. So like Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
I have watched all 3 movies like, I don't know, just like spitballing here, maybe like 20 times each.
Yeah.
Because like, I mean, I could go, if there was like another person in the room that like also knew all the lines, like we could just like bop, 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 like most of the movie.
That's crazy.
But like, it drives me nuts because like none of my friends watch. I guess they like Lord of the Rings.
I like it well enough, but I got tired of it real fast. And it's one of those things now where when I watch it, I just remember back to when I would watch it like every day. I'm just like, oh, not this again. And it's not like anyone like so there's certain things that I find that I end up liking, or there's certain things that I find that I just end up thinking are overrated because of how much other people like it. Lord of the Rings is not one of those. But it's always been on the cusp. But it's not on the cusp in terms like I've ever thought it, but it's like it's up to the point where like I'm tired of it to a point where I could see me thinking like, oh, this is just overrated, which I don't think it's overrated. But I have my coworkers make fun of me. I have like a list of things that I'm passionately like upset by how much people like, where I think it's like way too overrated. I'm not going to go into it on here because I don't want people to be mad at me. I'll tell you off mic.
Okay.
But I have like a list of things where I'm just like, this is like fine. Like when I say overrated, I don't always mean that it's necessarily bad either. I just think that it's like, oh, this is good, but it's not like that Christ-like pedestal that everyone keeps talking about it type of thing. It's more just kind of like, a lesser god, maybe it's just the Archangel Michael or something like that, like just one step down. But no, so we got into all that because we were talking about voice actors, because Graham McTavish is in The Hobbit, which went on to that whole
because he is not Gimli.
He is not Gimli, nor is Robbie Coltrane. I can't remember that actor's name, who is Gimli, or who's Sala in Indiana Jones. But in any case, voice acting in general is just fantastic in this game.
There's one point that's I don't. You mentioned Indiana Jones, so I thought now would be a decent time to bring this up. There's a lot of comparisons between Uncharted and Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
And
especially, even more so because the new Tomb Raider kind of took after Uncharted style. Not in terms of gameplay. I actually am really like the new Tomb Raider series has a very different gameplay feel than Uncharted, but the storytelling is kind of similar-ish.
Right.
They dive more supernatural than Uncharted does.
Yeah, so it's like in a lot of respects, I think the Tomb Raider games, at least, so I've only played the first two new ones. I haven't gotten a Shadow of the Tomb Raider yet.
Yeah.
So I'm going to focus more on the first one. I actually think that it might be better than some of the Uncharted games.
Oh, I agree. It's more detailed. There's more stuff to do. The storytelling's different. I'm not going to say it's better, but it's different.
Yeah, so that's like my hitch there, is that it pains me to say that it's better than Uncharted because I like Uncharted more.
But it's also an unfair comparison because they got the luxury of learning from Uncharted.
Sure.
Like they could see what Uncharted did well and find their own tweaks to it to make it what it was. And like, don't get me wrong, I love Uncharted, but the gameplay is kind of dated in a sense where it's very simplistic, straightforward third-person shooter, which isn't a bad thing. It's just you don't really see that as much anymore. There's always RPG elements added in. Look at like Horizon Zero Dawn. Look at God of War. Look at granted, I know God of War isn't a shooter, but
yeah, it's that kind of those little RPG elements like your weapon crafting and your salvaging stuff in Tomb Raider. It's not something.
Dylan's back. Sorry.
It's not something that I would want to see added to Uncharted. But it's one of those things that kind of sets it apart, where it's like, oh, this is a more modern game, and like maybe it's better.
Yeah.
Because of that, but it's like with Half-Life, where it's like I love the Half-Life series, but I don't want them to take on all these new things, because then it's not going to be Half-Life anymore.
Exactly. And that's why, like I was saying, like I actually think the reason why they left Uncharted where it was at is because they saw the gameplay style is starting to become a little bit dated. Like I still love playing Uncharted, but like I said, it's simplistic. The gameplay is very simplistic compared to what it is now. And that's not to say bad. Simple does never mean bad. I mean, it can mean bad, I guess.
You're a simple man.
Yeah, you're a simple man. But no,
doesn't necessarily mean bad.
It doesn't necessarily mean bad, and it doesn't mean bad in this situation. But it's not going to be as popular as it once was, just for the fact that players expect more of things now. Like the gaming landscape is very different. Like Uncharted worked when it came out because the popular game at the time was Call of Duty, and you're kind of going that frenetic action shooter. And don't get me wrong, Call of Duty is still popular, but now the popular game is, the arena stuff, oh my gosh, Fortnite and Apex Legends and PUBG and stuff like that. Those are the big like draws right now, especially Fortnite, obviously. And Uncharted is a very different style of gameplay than Fortnite. Fortnite has a lot more complexity to it, though I have not played Fortnite, but from what I've seen. So I almost wonder if they kind of like decided to let the series close out on top like that, because Uncharted 4 was a huge hit.
Yeah, so Uncharted 4, I feel like they added a lot of stuff in there to kind of mix it up more.
They definitely did.
Which
Wasn't bad.
I understand why they did it, and I understand that those are cool things that they added. But for me, it's one of those situations where it kind of stops being the Uncharted that I know. And when they're like, "Oh, you need to grappling hook, swing, and shoot this dude, and then jump on the thing," it's like, that's not what I wanted. It's fine, and I'll play it, and I'll enjoy it for the most part. But it's not like that core thing that I'm like thriving on. You know?
What do you think Uncharted is at its core? Like, what do you think is the core element that makes an Uncharted game an Uncharted game? Is it the story? Is it the story, like where it's kind of like an Indiana Jones swashbuckling adventure, like a pulp adventure type of novel? Is it the platforming combination with like shooting, which is very different? Like you seldom, like Uncharted 4, I think, try to mix platforming with shooting and to try to do a combination of the two. Uncharted 1 through 3, really, it was very separate. Like, you could hang on ledges and shoot, but for the most part, you didn't have to platform and shoot at the same time.
I think one of the big things that sets it apart from other games is that sense of humor.
I would agree with that.
So we talked a little bit about Tomb Raider versus Uncharted.
Yeah.
And like, as good as Tomb Raider is, it's like a lot more serious.
It's a lot dark. I mean,
Right.
when Lara dies in those games, you feel bad because she gets fucking brutalized with those murders. It's kind of terrifying, actually.
Versus the like Metal Gear Solid style, like Nate. Dun, 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 dun,
Well, you
dun,
also
dun, dun.
ragdoll in Uncharted.
Yeah, as soon as
Yeah,
you die, you
it's-
just kind of like,
Yeah.
which is a little comedic to see. No, you're right, though. I mean, would it be its sense of humor for you then? Is that what makes an Uncharted game an Uncharted game?
I mean, I'm
I mean,
there's-
obviously, you can't really distill it down to one element. I feel like to distill, like, what really makes it, like, because you could have all the humor of Uncharted, but if it's got completely different gameplay, it's not Uncharted. So,
Right.
like, you need, I feel like the gameplay has to come first and foremost, but, like, I guess, like, what really sets it out from the others?
I
Like,
guess I'm focusing more on the writing
Yeah.
and how like Naughty Dog's character development, and because they have really good character development in like The Last of Us, but the sense of humor is like not there.
it's also not written by the same person. Amy Hennig wrote the first 3 Uncharted games, and Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley wrote Last of Us as well as Uncharted 4, which is, you can kind of tell it's a little bit darker of a tone.
Yeah, it's a little less lighthearted. It still has those kind of like Nate goofing around moments, but you're right. He's like older and kind of not quite as. I guess he's a little more
like, you
serious.
can even see how he interacts with Elena in the 4th one is a lot different than how he interacts, and a lot of it I think actually fits because now they're like married. They're married in that one. We shouldn't dissect that one just yet. We're going to talk about it. But no, I could see that. I definitely see like the sense of humor, especially on Uncharted 2. Like, you quoted the whole final scene of the game. Like, it's really funny. Like, they do a really good job with the humor and it fits so well with like the tongue-in-cheekness of it, of how like when you're in the middle of fighting, and we haven't even talked about this yet, but like, when Nate is fighting and he kills someone, he said, he usually has some expression to say, and one of the weirdest ones is "Kitty got wet," and that he just like you'll like punch someone, will say, "Oh, kitty got wet," like as like an insult. And it was kind of cool. I just learned today that the reason for that is Nolan North, the voice of Nathan Drake. That was his kid says that, like when they were playing Wii Sports, his kid beat him in Wii Tennis, and his kid said, "Oh, kitty got wet," meaning people don't like to lose, just like cats don't like to get wet. And so he improvised that during a reading, and that's why it's still in the game. And it's kind of a weird line because you're like, are you
Oddly
talking about
sexual?
Yeah, like is that sexual? Like, I don't know if I feel comfortable with this.
He's like, yeah, just beat this dude. Did that turn you on?
Yeah, right. That was really funny. But yeah, they have quips like that all throughout. Like the "oh crap," like who would have thought just the line "oh crap" would be synonymous with a character, but it's synonymous with Drake because they did a good job kind of making that tone. And I actually think they really solidified it in 2. Now that I'm replaying 2, like 1 was fun, and it still had those tongue-in-cheek moments, but they really came into their own with 2. Like, definitely. I guess to kind of, because we've been going for a little bit there, I feel like there's more we could talk about, but we've been going for, oh gosh, almost 2 hours. Maybe once I edit this down, it's going to be like an hour 40, but we'll see. So any final thoughts on Uncharted 2 before to wrap this whole thing up?
It's definitely my favorite in the series so far, though I've not played and finished 4, and I've never played Lost Legacy. So,
have you ever played Golden Abyss for the PS Vita?
No, I forgot about that.
People always forget that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna say out of the first 3 games is definitely my favorite one.
I would agree, 100%.
Absolutely. It's when I played Lost Legacy, like right afterwards, I was like, damn, that is the best Uncharted game. But since playing it, I don't really remember it that well. So like I'm gonna have to go through it again, and maybe I'll stand by that. But right now, I'd have to say Uncharted 2 still holds up as my favorite one.
Definitely. All right. So I think that should wrap it up for this week's episode of Still Loading. Thank you all once again for listening. Dylan and Tristan, thank you for joining me for this week's episode.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you guys have anything you want to plug at all?
No, I don't really do anything. I guess you can follow me on Twitter. I shitpost a lot about politics and video games. I'm at Lord Gatsu.
Lord Gatsu. I'm guessing LORDGATSU.
GATTSU. Gatsu.
Gatsu. Anything for you, Tristan? Or
I am on all the social medias, but I post nothing on any of them, so you may not have mine.
Fair enough. As usual, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you'd like to support the show monetarily, you can check out my Patreon, patreon.com/StillLoadingPod. It would mean a lot if you checked it out. You can also check out everyone on the network I'm a part of, the Podbeard Network. You can go to podbeardnetwork.com for that, or go to my website, stillloadingpodcast.com. And if you get a chance to, I would really appreciate if you left a rating or review. If you don't want to support me on the Patreon, I totally get it, but a rating and review would definitely help. It helps the show appear in more people's feeds. It literally helps with that. Word of mouth obviously helps too. Just anything you can do, it would mean the world to me. So real quick, I just want to give a shout out to my new buddy Super Smack. He is a nerdcore rapper based out of New York City, and he was nice enough to let me use one of the songs from his new EP that was just released, Neon Red. You can check the EP out on Bandcamp, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Music /iTunes, and I will include a link as to where you can find it in the show notes, so please check it out. I think that should wrap up everything that I have on this. So, guys, once again, thank you. And I will see you all next time.
JGS, baby.
Go, little mama, get gone. I bring the funk, clean off the dome like as if I was a monk. Packing like a wizard, saying after yo truck. Forward air spike KO with the dunkin', I'm dunkin' ruse, never stuck. It's a ruse when you think you're so unique and no exception to the rule. When the baddies take your stash, you better step him, he a fool. When I power up my punch, I'm gonna wreck him. K-Rule, got nothing on me. And when I bounce them baddies, it's a part-time job. I much prefer to spend my days being a slob and watching movies with my groupies and drinking smoothies. Bananas tasting better than coins and rupees. I don't care for a 9 to 5. I'm old school like it's 95. Heart beating cause I feel alive. Chest beating cause I feel alive. Yeah. Don't pay no mind to what plagues your mind. Get gone, little mama, get gone.
Take a look and you'll see that I'm the baddest dude. Got a lot of attitude, yep, I'm a savage dude. I'm the top croc, always moving non-stop. Make a lot of money with the mic cards in my chop shop. You could get everybody from your clan involved. If I ever see your face, it's catching a cannonball. Damn it all, if we fight it out, then I'll be standing tall. King so cool, I'm surprised that you can stand it all. Doesn't matter what you throw, cause I know it can manage. Musta lost all your bananas if you thought it was causing me damage. Cause I got the rockin' style, no secret I've gotten wild. If you piss me off, I'll snap at you like a crocodile. Better back off, cause you ain't nothing. My whole crew will get you if you say something. They chomp, chomp, chomp like they tryna eat a muffin. They take it slow, my Kremlins ain't rushing, let's get it.
Don't pay no mind to what plagues your mind. Get gone, little mama, get gone.
Check this, I'm getting reckless. Boys, step aside, I can eat y'all for breakfast. All these little kitties never give me no respect, cause I'm small and wearing pink, man, I think this kinda sexist. DK clan ain't nothing to mess with. My flow is electric, rip the soul straight, golden set. Respect, just with my energy and beauty and grace. Got my helicopter hair, whip a dude in the face. If my babe didn't care, I'll give a run for your money. From country to country, the funkiest monkey. I jump in the bungees, flying right into danger, baby, I'm a major badass. And every male gamer's favorite character to play as. They mad that they wish they couldn't handle my lateral swish. One sip and you ain't getting enough. I'm like a liquor in a glass, come and Dixie cup. Woo!
Don't pay no mind to what plagues your mind. Get gone, little mama, get gone. Excuse me while I produce me. Y'all thirsty for a tea bag? I'm drinking loose leaf. Sure, I like Bruce Lee, and I like Chun-Li, but unless you my skin tone, you cannot assume me. Speaking of hot kicks, the stat kicks, that ain't me. I like Diddy when he take the charge. Looking for a worthy D-I-X-I-E little lady who be living large. I'm talking conquest, I'm talking co-op. She is my best friend. We are not robots, we are two mammals straight from the jungle. Our blood is warm and like my bars it do flow. Things come better in twos. If it's blues you're feeling, whip your hair in the wind, spin some tunes you're feeling. I like to cartwheel my woes, go stampede on them. Then I ride like the rhino going Ramby on them. Don't pay no mind to what plagues your mind. Get gone, little mama, get gone.
So let's dump. I was about to say let's dump right into this. That would be awful.
Take a dump.
We've been pumping, now it's time to dump.